This video on the Book of Daniel is part of a series of videos put out by Yeshiva University Torah Mitzion Beit Midrash Zichron Dov in advance of our Tanach in a Day program, a program scheduled for Sunday, December 24th, when we will offer a series of classes on each book in Tanach. For more information on that program, please see www.torontotorah.com/Tanach. That's Tanach. This Tanakh video is sponsored by Nathan Kirsch in loving memory of his parents, Rachel bat Mordechai Zichrono Livracha, and Yehuda Pesach ben Naftali HaKohen Zichrono Livracha. So, a little bit of an outline of the book of Daniel. It's really a book that splits cleanly in two. The first half of the book, the first 6 chapters, speak of the adventures of Daniel, as well as Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. These are Jews who have been taken captive as part of the Babylonian conquest of Judea, and they're being held in the court, at least initially, of the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. So in the first chapter, we find out about how they become trophies, essentially, in his court, and I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. Then in chapters 2 through 4, we find Daniel, as well as Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, interacting with King Nebuchadnezzar. It's really an arc that represents the humbling of King Nebuchadnezzar, and hopefully when we have our class on Daniel on December 24th, I'll speak about that a little bit more. Then in Perek Hey in chapter 5, you have Daniel interacting with a later Babylonian king, Belshazzar. He's the last king of Babylon before they're conquered by the Persians and the Medes. That's the famous story of the writing on the wall, which Daniel interprets. And then in Perek Vav in chapter 6, you have Daniel advising a king named Daryavesh. The book describes him as Darius the Mede. We'll have to discuss in the class exactly what his identity was. Who is Darius the Mede? But he is another king, and Daniel is summoned to help him. There is jealousy against Daniel by some of the members of Darius's court, and ultimately that leads to the famous story of Daniel in the lion's den. So that's your first half of the book, is adventures in foreign courts. The second half of the book is very different. Chapters 7 through 12. These are the visions of Daniel regarding the future. So that chapters 7 and 8, the beginning of this segment, have Daniel experience a dream, and then he asks questions, and an angel answers him about it. And then in chapters 9 and 10, Daniel offers a prayer on behalf of the Jews. He is distressed by what he has seen in his dreams about the future of the Jewish people, and he is answered by an angel. And then in chapters 11 and 12, Daniel has visions which Don Isaac Abarbanel interpreted to refer to the future of the future of the Greeks and the Romans, as well as the time of Mashiach and Olam Haba. There's even a reference to Tchias HaMesim, the ultimate revival of the dead at the end. So that's your basic book. Now, who writes Daniel? Well, clearly it's a book of Daniel's visions and conversations with angels, and is a record of his life. However, the Talmud itself says that Daniel is not the final author of his book. Rather, the Anshe Knesset Hagdola, the Great Assembly in the beginning of the Second Temple period, they are the ones who actually assemble and edit the book of Daniel. The visions here in this book may be described as prophetic visions. However, interestingly, there's a lot of debate among the sages as to whether Daniel qualifies as a Navi, whether he qualifies as a prophet, perhaps because he's never told to take a message to anybody. If anything, he's actually told at one point to seal up his visions so that they will not be understood. A Navi's job, principally, is to bring messages to the nation. The origin of the word Navi is traced by some to Niv, as in Niv Sfatayim, speech, or Lahavi, somebody whose job is to carry a message. Daniel does neither of those. Also worth noting, much of the book is in Aramaic. Particularly the first half of the book, the part that tells the stories of Daniel's life, that is in Aramaic. Abarbanel theorizes that Aramaic is really there for the stories, but Daniel's own message and those of the angels with whom he communicates later in the book, those are in Hebrew. The messages of Sefer Daniel, of this book of Daniel, well, for starters, retention of our Jewish identity in exile is a major theme of the book. The sanctification of God's name by Jews, and even with miracles when they are in exile, that's clear in the first half of the book. The punishment and rehabilitation of King Nebuchadnezzar, and the idea that the arrogant will meet their downfall, also very prominent in the first half of the book. And the divine hand controlling history is really the major theme of the second half of the book, with the future of the Jewish people featured front and center. How does Sefer Daniel convey these messages? So one thought here for the video, looking at that first chapter of the book in which Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are in captivity under the Babylonians, and as I said, they're taken as trophies of Judea to be members of the king's court. The goal of Nebuchadnezzar seems very clearly to take them as trophies and to show them becoming Babylonians. So he gives them Babylonian names. They are to be trained in the script and the language of Babylon. And they are supposed to eat patibaga, food from the king's table. Here, though, they draw the line. And Daniel says, I refuse. He doesn't say it to Nebuchadnezzar. It probably would have been a very short book had he said that to Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel says it to the king's agent who is responsible to bring them the food. He says, we're not having this. We want to eat seeds instead. And the initial agent they approach says, I am not about to cross Nebuchadnezzar. No way. And then they approach a second person in the line, and they say to him, listen, you could take the food home to your family. This is food from the king's table. We're just not going to eat it. And he also is afraid for his life. He says, I can't do that. And they offer him a test. They say, listen, try for 10 days. Let us just eat our seeds for 10 days and see how we are. If at the end of 10 days you can't see a difference, we look just as healthy, then we'll be able to pass this off. No one will be any the wiser, and we'll be able to go forward with this plan. He agrees, and sure enough, at the end of 10 days, they look great. They look healthy, even healthier than everybody else looks. There's some debate in the commentaries as to whether this is to be viewed as a miracle or whether it's just the healthy vegetarian diet that they're eating. But either way, they refuse, at potential cost to their life, they refuse to eat the food from the king's table, and the question, of course, is why. So, one view, and this is Ibn Ezra's view, is the kashrut issue. The food's not kosher. And that's one take. A second take is brought in the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Daf Lamed Hey, Daf Lamed Vav, and it suggests that the issue was not about kosher food, according to Rav there in the Gemara, but rather Daniel separates from that food as a decision meant to prevent assimilation. This may even be tied into the rabbinic decree against Stam Yenam, but that's a broader topic, not for this video. But the idea is to prevent assimilation. And then there's a third possible explanation for why Daniel says we're not having the king's food, and that is they're trying to make Daniel and his friends part of the Babylonian court. They're trying to make them, as I said before, their trophies of Judea, but to show them becoming Babylonian. And that is what Daniel struggles with. That's what Daniel cannot bring himself to accept. We draw the line at becoming Babylonian in this sense, eating the scraps from the king's table. There's more to be said about that because that also fits into later stories within the book, particularly in the third parak, the third chapter of Daniel, when Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah refuse to bow to Nebuchadnezzar's statue. But this supports one of the key messages of the book, which is the retention of our identity in exile, that we are not willing to become Babylonian. There is much more to discuss regarding the Sefer. I hope you'll join me for the class on Daniel on December 24th. Once again, please go to www.torontotorah.com/Tanach for more information. Thank you very much.